Good evening, everybody. It is Monday, October 15th, 2019. This is the Wilmette Park District regular meeting, Board of Park Commissioners. To start our meeting, may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Abbott.
Here.
Commissioner Murdoch.
Here.
Commissioner Schisler.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Goebel.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to approval of minutes. We have quite a few minutes from regular meetings, closed session, and special meetings that we had in August and September.
I will move to, I'm going to have a comment about it, but I'll go ahead and move to approve the August 12th, 2019 regular meeting minutes.
Second. Thank you. Comments, please?
Yeah, on page 1 of 6, under recognition of visitors, the second paragraph, Sophie Candido and Kathleen Sullivan expressed their collective voice for the Thornwood neighbors, reiterated their priorities for Thornwood Park, save the trees, return the park to its original design, have function returned as soon as possible, use a portable generator, locate the vault as close to the street as possible, include language in the memo of understanding, giving the public more time and input. I have no objection to that. That's fine. But they did mention, and I think it should go in the meeting minutes, that they were advocating that bathrooms not be added and the sledding hill not be added to the park. And they've been kind of consistently putting that in their ask. So I'd like to just see it in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, as long as they said that specifically.
They did, and
Okay.
I believe the thought was function returned as soon as possible, original design, that no new amenities is encapsulated, but if
Okay.
we want to spell it out a little more, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Then I'm good with that.
Any other questions or comments on this set of minutes? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott.
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch.
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. Next up is another set of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes for the August 12th, 2019 closed session meeting.
Second.
Are there any comments? So if there are any comments or questions on this, we will go into closed session later to discuss that. If there are none, then we can approve them out here now. So are there any comments or questions on these?
None.
Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott.
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch.
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
All right, another set of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes for the August 19th, 2019 special meeting.
I'll second.
Are there any comments or questions on this set of minutes?
Yes, I have some comments on it. On page 4, on the end of the first paragraph where it says Commissioner Clark then acknowledged a suggestion offered during public comment for a T-shaped plan. I believe it was more that I mentioned that I referenced the fact that that there was a T-shaped plan that had recently been developed by the village. Rather than, I didn't just mention that it was something that we had just learned that as a commissioner and verify that. So it wasn't it wasn't a suggestion offered during public comment. It was, I think it was a configuration that I was bringing up during the meeting that we had just learned about. And also that the estimated cost of this T-shaped configuration is less than the estimated cost of the other gravity-driven tank configurations. That's another one.
Is that in a different paragraph?
That would have been
Within that same.
Oh, within that same
paragraph. In addition, I believe I also mentioned the possibility of including the additional stormwater tank to hold the water that was held by the MWRD permitted detention that was part of the Cottonwood Grove. So instead of just bringing up the T, it was bringing up the idea of that the T plus the additional stormwater tank that would hold the water that is currently in the detention pond in the Cottonwood Groves. So I have that change.
Before you move on, is there do you need any further clarification for that?
So any other comments on these meetings we want to hear tonight, but I would recommend we table actually approving them, allow us to go back and rewrite them and have people put eyes on what it is, because this is more than just a word or two
Right.
addition.
Yep.
So, but definitely any more input or other suggestions.
Okay. So Libby will go back and listen to what was said and add some additional context around that. Okay.
And then,
Other?
Yes, the only other, I think the other correction, two more corrections on page 5. That would be the third full paragraph. Darren Olson from Christopher Burke Engineering clarified that a tank at community playfields, where it says the detention area will no longer be required by permit, I think it's that the addition, that including an additional tank for underground storage to hold that water, then would no longer, the detention area would not be longer, because the tanks, the original tanks, do
Yep.
not meet that. And then finally, on same page 5, one paragraph up, so it's after additional discussion, it says the board agreed to the T-plan. It agreed to the T-plan with an additional underground storage vault to hold the water that's currently held in the MWRD permitted detention area, which is the location of the Cottonwood Grove. Those are my only additions to that. Any comments on
Okay.
those?
Any other comments to this? Okay, we will go back and revise these and approve these at the next board meeting. Okay. We have another set of minutes from a regular meeting.
Yes, I move to approve the minutes for the September 9th, 2019 regular meeting.
Second.
Are there any comments or corrections to these meeting minutes? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. And finally, our last set of meeting minutes from a closed session. Again, if there are any comments or corrections to these, we will go into a closed session later to discuss that. Otherwise, we can approve it and vote on it now.
I move to approve the minutes for the September 9th, 2019 closed session meeting.
I second.
Are there any comments or questions? Okay,
Like to,
that's fine. Then we'll go into a closed session later at the end of this meeting.
thank you very much.
So we will table that vote until later. Okay, moving along, we have communications and correspondence. I believe there was one letter in the packet here regarding our Sizzlin' Summer September pool offering, which I think has been very favorably viewed by many in the community. We got a lot of positive feedback that people like to be in the pool in the beautiful month of September here. So thank you for that communication. Was there anything else that was not in our packet that any commissioners would like to add?
Actually, I will, and I'm not sure I can find it right here. We talked about it in the Parks and Rec Committee meeting, but we received a letter from a sophomore.
Commissioner Clark has it.
Oh, thank you. That's where that is going. We received a letter from a sophomore at New Trier, William Cesaretti, if I pronounced that correctly, saying that he would like to know if we offer any electrical vehicle chargers at any of our facilities or any of our parks. We do not currently, and he wanted to encourage us to look at that in the future.
Thank you. Any other communications or correspondence? We'll move along to recognition of visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to us? We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and keep it to everything at hand. Yes.
Hello again.
Sorry.
I'm Kathleen Sullivan of 1225 Colgate Street, and I'm here to represent the Colgate Street Neighborhood Association that has a specific interest in Thornwood Park. I'm following up on an email we sent to all of you on October 8th, to which we have yet to receive a reply. The email was in regards to our ability to give public input during the IGA creation process, and also on today's agenda, I don't see my email to you under communications and correspondence. So perhaps that could be added. As always, we applaud your foresight to host several public input sessions per park during the winter and spring of 2019 for residents to react to vault configurations. We've asked several times for similar public input sessions during the months the IGA is being finalized and formalized. However, we don't see those public input sessions on either the Park District or the Village's calendars. We'd like to know the specifics of those meetings so we can give our neighbors ample time to plan to attend. Our understanding was that a draft IGA would be available mid-October, and the final IGA would be signed before the end of the year. So is that timing still accurate? We did get a reply to some of our questions on October 19th from the village via their manager, Tim Frenzer, who had checked in with his corporate counsel, Jeff Stein, about the status. Mr. Stein advised Mr. Frenzer that the Park District's attorney was to take the lead in developing the basic document to work off of, so as of last week, the village was still waiting on your attorneys for an initial working draft. So our questions are, who is informing your attorney about specific requests for Thornwood Park? When will the public have access to the draft IGA? Again, we'd like to give residents plenty of time to read through the details and to understand the logistical and legal implications of the IGA. As always, we value the work you've done to make Thornwood Park a perfect resource for our community, and we hope that the park will remain unchanged after the construction phase is completed. However, we currently feel disconnected from the planning phase. For all we know, recommendations have been made to put a public restroom or permanent generator or paved access roads or maybe even a sledding hill mere feet from someone's backyard. We hope to proactively stay ahead of any adversarial dynamics that might develop if public input is not gathered soon enough. I think we all want to avoid the PR problems that occurred this summer after you voted to remove the Cottonwood Grove at community playfields. The interaction did create some mistrust of the process since we had previously not heard of any plans for new amenities at each park. For example, if the Park District had wanted to add playing fields by cutting down trees, why did that project have to be linked to the stormwater project? Or if the Park District feels the need to put in permanent restrooms at a neighborhood park like Thornwood, why hadn't that project happened before? So again, the urgency around signing an IGA creates concern for those of us who want to give input about the final usage of the park and who are opposed to changes such as public restrooms or permanent generators. And in terms of communication, we'd like to be able to tell our neighbors when they can expect an email update from the Park District and or when they can read about updates in our local newspapers. So thanks for your time, and we look forward to working together, continuing to work together. But if you do have a moment, even if it is out of turn, I'm hoping that someone can respond to some of my questions now, since we haven't received a reply to the email.
So I'm going to ask Director Wilson to speak to that.
And I'd like to apologize. I'm not getting you a response. I wrote a response, ran it past our president, and I was supposed to send it in the last couple days, and I failed to do that. So that'll be coming forward to you tomorrow. But basically, the gist of that is, so the IGA establishes basically the legal responsibilities of the village and the Park District. It doesn't establish specifics as to where a tank's going to go, if there's going to be a generator or not, where there's going to be a bathroom or not, or if there's going to be a bathroom. What it is it's a negotiation of those different responsibilities and any compensation that changes hands between the two entities in regard to the project. Since it's a negotiation, it isn't done within the public sphere. It's actually one of the exempted rules to the Open Meetings Act is negotiations such as that. And so the document itself will become available when both parties agree to bring it forward to their boards to be reviewed, discussed, and voted upon at whatever time frame the two boards establish. So it'll be through several drafts to get there. As far as where it stands currently, yes, it currently stands between myself and our attorney, creating that draft for the village attorney to then review with their staff and however their process works on their side. As far as public input meetings, at this time, I don't believe we have any planned in regards to the IGA. And that is basically the essence of the email.
But just to clarify, Steve, we will have one or two meetings where the IGA will be on the agenda.
Absolutely.
And people are free to
and public comment is,
yes.
of course, welcomed and sought at that
Great.
point.
And also
Yes.
to clarify, we're doing one park at a time with the city two, and Playfields is the first one up. Is that correct?
The IGA is in respect to all three
No,
parks.
but as far as going through all of the work itself, the Playfields is the first one up.
Yeah, if you're talking about specific design, yes, that's where they're putting their design time and energy and dollars.
Does that answer your questions?
It does. So would the actual draft of the IGA being proposed maybe in the next 2 months or so, would that have any specifics about Thornwood Park? Would it have any comments about restroom or generator or location of pumping station?
So again, as it's a negotiation and it's outside of the public context, I'm not going to answer that question just because we're not looking to necessarily, get into a public negotiation. This is a private negotiation. So I'm not going to comment either which way.
I think, Kathleen, you've been very consistent with your comments, meeting after meeting, so
I'm pretty sure we know where you
Okay.
stand.
We're aware, yeah.
You know, it's no question, you're not equivocating, and it's very clear, so.
Yeah, and we're taking all that in as we're discussing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address us? Okay. We'll be moving along to the voucher list.
All right. I would move to approve the voucher list in the amount of $1,518,576.66, a copy of which is to be attached to and become a permanent part of the minutes of this meeting.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions regarding the voucher list?
I have one. It's the first one, which is the Gilson Playground ADA surface. Is that the final payment for them? Correct. And they're all done? They fixed it all? Satisfied? Okay. That's all. That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Goble?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Voucher list is approved.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the Executive Director's Report.
Sure. I will be brief if I could get down to it on my
We just touched on a little bit of
document
it.
here. All right, so we're in full-on budget mode here at the Park District. We kicked off our budget process just prior to this meeting, or actually we've been doing it with financial planning, but as far as looking at the actual operating and non-operating budgets of the district as compiled by staff, we started that process tonight before this meeting with the Parks and Recreation Committee. It is a significant chunk of our budget, and I'll let Commissioner Murdoch report on that during the committee reports. We're going to follow that up with financial planning and policy, as well as the Parks Department next week, and then move on to Lakefront and the Golf Committee at the start of November. Middle of November,
No, sorry. There's something.
I thought you were trying to
No,
signal me.
no.
Smoke signals. The middle of November, on November 13th, we're going to do a committee of the whole meeting where we review the entire capital plan for the entire district. Each committee is reviewing their portion of the capital plan, making suggestions, learning information to prepare for that committee of the whole meeting that we'll have on November 13th. Then on December 4th, we're planning another committee of the whole meeting where we review the full budget compiled together, including capital, including the budget and appropriations ordinance and the tax levy and all of that in that one night. Then we approve the tax levy in December, file it in December, and take formal action on the budget at the January 2020 meeting. Other than that, looking forward at your agenda, the only item on your agenda under new business is the appointment of a delegate to represent the Wilmette Park District at the IAPD annual business meeting. This used to be one of my favorite agenda items because it was fun to watch you guys throw each other to the lions, but I have sacrificed myself last year and do so again this year, and request that you appoint me the delegate, and then you can appoint one of yourselves or volunteer to be my backup, but you will not have to attend as I will be there. That
Thank you.
concludes
Is
my
there
report.
anybody that would like to volunteer to be the backup delegate?
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
Get there.
I know, that's for the motion.
I go on Friday, and by the way, it is a really fascinating conference, and you learn a lot, and I try to go. Last year I was sick. No, did my knee.
Your knee last year.
Yeah, right. But anyway, it's
Okay.
great. But I don't usually go on Saturday.
All right, we'll get to that
I'm
one
not
later.
volunteering.
Any questions for Steve? Our executive director? Mr. Nelson? Okay.
Oh, actually, I do have a
yeah.
question about the
Yeah.
report.
Yes.
Just in our very substantial packet, we mentioned that we started with Parks and Rec. There was a line in the introduction I just wanted to clarify, because I don't recall if we did this. It referenced each budget incorporates the uniform increases as approved by the board. I think the Financial Planning and
Financial
Policy
Planning
Committee
Yes.
approved it, but the board hasn't discussed that at this
Correct.
point.
Correct.
All right, great.
And their budget meetings, we haven't set those dates yet for both the capital. There's 2 budget meetings at the end of the year, right?
Yeah,
We
they're
have
in,
set
they're
that?
in here,
So
November
they're in the
13th
report,
and
November
December 4th.
13th for the capital and December 4th for the full budget.
Yep.
Right here.
And then, just so everybody knows, we'll vote
Okay, thank
on
you.
the approved budget at our January meeting.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We'll move along to committee reports. First up on our committee reports is the Lakefront Committee.
Do we have to appoint Steve?
We will, I believe
yet.
that's an
Not yet.
action
Not yet.
item
Oh, not
later
yet. Okay.
that we
I
will
was getting so
discuss. I
excited.
know, it's an
Yeah.
exciting
I
topic.
didn't want it to sort of go to somebody else by mistake.
No,
so-
no. We will definitely let him have that one.
All right.
Okay, Lakefront Committee.
Lakefront, the meeting was primarily, the vast majority of the meeting was revolved around the RFPs, the proposals that we received for both the shoreline consultant and the master plan proposals. We received 4 proposals for the shoreline consultant. We received 8 for the master planning. Before we go any further, I have, because this is a general question for the board, and I value your input here. My concern, having read, we've not taken any additional steps at this point, except to discuss the proposals and kind of provide our input. And Mr. Meyer is here from Stantec, by the way. Hi, Todd.
Hello.
So that gentleman out there, he's just curious, is what I understand. So my concern, having read through the proposals, and I could be wrong, but before we go into talking interviews with these, I wanted to double check with the board. I believe that the way this was presented to the board is that this is phase 2 of the Lakefront project. I'm talking about the master plan at this point. Phase 2, the scope was relatively defined as replacement of the roads or refurbishment, let's use that word, of the roads. The storm sewer that's within the park that handles the storm sewer, some consideration of the sidewalks, and not necessarily didn't know where that might go. We'll get some architectural input on that. And probably the biggest ask, which that wasn't any preconceived plan, was landscaping. Now, having said all that, I think that perhaps this board feels, I certainly feel, Gilson isn't broke. So why do too much? Shall the committee sort of in their interviews try to kind of limit the discussion to these particular items? Oh, and possibly an option for sailing beach bathrooms. Shall we try to kind of limit these discussions to just really primarily those topics with some little bit of latitude, or is this a reimagining of Gilson Park? And it really is an open-ended question. And how is the committee empowered to go ahead and move forward? Do other commissioners want to take a more active role? So I don't have any preconceived notions here. I'd let Cecilia, Commissioner Clark, and Commissioner Anderson say anything that you were at the meeting as well. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
As I mentioned at the meeting, we were looking, the state of repair at Gilson Park is pretty bad in terms of the civil stuff. The roads are bad. We do have issues with safety, with the sharing of the roads with cars, bicycles, and people walking. So there's sort of been an immediate need there for a few years that we just haven't got to. So I'm anxious to get at it. Mm-hmm. And I think we sort of made the leap, not necessarily with great knowledge, that we didn't really want to start doing a whole lot in terms of moving roads around, because that gets really expensive, and we're trying to watch what we're spending, and at the same time too, the one message we got from all the surveys is that don't mess with Gilson. It's good as it is. It needs obviously some fixing up here and there, but we don't want to be too much. Now the other side of the coin is, we're so into it that there's something kind of interesting about getting another perspective from people who do this for a living and don't live here, or maybe aren't around. What are we missing that is so obvious that we've missed it, but we should do if we were going to do something? Wouldn't know what that is. I have nothing on my mind, but it's always kind of interesting. What are we missing that could be kind of cool? So that's where I'm at.
Yes, and I think I had a similar response. I don't want, not looking at a total reimagination of that, but that I do think that there may be tweaks that can be made, and to some extent with the roads, is to separate the pedestrians from the cars as well. And I guess I kind of feel more the landscaping that I think there can be some room for improvement, and that's where I would like to look at that.
So I'd like to canvass the commissioners and their thoughts as to what they think the Lakefront committee is doing and how far to take this exercise.
So I'd like to say something. So we did a survey with the community and looked at what people would like to see within the park.
Correct.
From that, we had kind of a phase one, which was the beach house, and then the phase two was the roads and sewers. There were some other things on there that kind of come into play with that. If we are going to be tearing up or resurfacing roads and putting in sewers, adding pedestrian path lanes, bike lanes, things like that that kind of go in conjunction with that. There's some areas that there's roadways we don't use, so taking those out and what could be programmed there. So I think it's making sure that we're kind of following what the community would like us to do, but not over-imagining, like, to your point, like of doing anything kind of crazy there, but kind of fixing what we have, and if we're taking out a section of the roadway, what could go there? Is it, I have no idea what that would be, but to Gordon's point, maybe it's something we haven't thought of yet. I do believe we also heard very strongly from a lot of the sailors that they would like a sailing bathroom. I know that was kind of put on the back burner as we were doing the beach house project, but that is something that's come up time and time again. The other thing that has come up has been to kind of, it didn't come up high on the survey, but Lakeview Center, maybe it's just painting it to make it look more like the beach house now, or something that, so it just kind of blends in more. I'm not talking reconfiguring it, I'm not talking doing any construction, but making it so that it kind of looks more in conjunction with the current beach house that we have. So I think there are a few things of just, as you said, Gordon, tweaking what is down there and not coming up with some new overall plan.
Okay.
Finally, we have made a kind of group consensus that we'd like to have a landscaping plan for each of our parks. And I think that goes along, one of our biggest parks, our biggest park is Gilson. And so I think it is probably important that we have a landscaping plan for that. It doesn't mean that we're going to do it all at once, because landscape can be very cost prohibitive, but I think it's prudent at this point, as we're looking about roads and sewers and how that affects the park, that we come up with a landscaping plan as well that we can move forward with, whether it's now or down the road when we have the money to do so. So I kind of am in that mindset of following what we had from the survey, keeping what we have, and just fixing what we need to fix, and kind of coming up with a plan for the future.
Okay, that's helpful.
Does that make sense?
That is helpful.
I agree with President Wolf's comments, and I would add, too, that we can use Gilson as the kickoff of a master plan for all parks. So certainly it's our largest park, and it would make sense as part of this effort to evaluate the landscaping, and perhaps there's a phasing of changes that could be made. But really, we should have a master plan for all parks in the district over time, and this would be a good one to start with.
So a master plan that not only would address immediate needs, but would also perhaps look to the future and then generations down the road. And
Certainly, it could be a 10-year plan. It could be, typically there are timeframes assessed, timeframes that align with the needs of the park.
Okay, that's good.
Is that something, though, that you're asking for the Lakefront Committee to come up with, or
I
for
think it's
us as
appropriate.
commissioners to come up with for all of our parks?
So I think it would be a good model for what we hope to accomplish in master planning, starting with Gilson. But I wouldn't expect the Lakefront Committee to do the entire park district. That doesn't seem to make sense.
What I'm asking is,
Yeah.
is your request for us as commissioners to do something for all of the parks, or are you requesting specifically that that be done for Gilson?
Yeah, so we should have a master plan as a park district. And with the Gilson reconsideration and how we're going to move on phase 2, this seems like a really logical time to kick off master planning. And then we would all provide input.
I guess I have a few different thoughts. I believe we've been talking and planning some work at Gilson at least 12 or 14 years now. Is that correct? It predated my prior term on the board. And I think that 5 of the 7 of us weren't involved when the referenda were considered, and I believe 4 of the 7 of us weren't involved when the community survey was done. I also know there's been a significant amount of planning already done over those past 12 or 14 years, and preparing for the referenda, or I guess the referendum specifically for Gilson, and then the community survey afterward. So from my perspective, I think before we move forward on a new plan, we should, as a group, review everything that's been done. And I think not just the Lakefront Committee, but all of us. I think realistically, this board has primarily been focused on the stormwater plan for the last year or two. Realistically, our plans for Gilson are probably going to define this board for the next year or two, or perhaps longer. And so I think it's important for all 7 of us to kind of get up to speed on everything that's been done to date, take a look at what planning has been done, and there may be some significant value in what's already been done, which may impact how much additional planning we want to do. But again, back to President Wolf's point, I agree that whatever we do, the planning should be comprehensive in nature. We may decide to implement phase 2 and then perhaps a phase 3 or phase 4 at some point down the road, but any planning, I think, should consider the Lakeview Center, should consider the Sailing Beach, probably should consider the Wallace Bowl as well. And I'm not sure that's where we are at this point with these RFPs. The other point, probably even more importantly, before we were to start spending money on new planning, I think it's very important we understand what's going to be involved in our beach erosion planning. It may turn out that we do very little or a lot. It may impact a small amount of the park or a great deal of the park, but sequentially, it seems to me that that should be done first, and then we can certainly do some planning, but before we certainly implement, I think we want to understand, again, what resources are going to be required, what's going to be necessary to secure our beachfront before we work on improving what we have.
And I just want to add, I'm not proposing new or different plans.
Sure.
It's compiling what we have and putting it into effect. 'Cause
And I
I
understand.
don't think the community's survey feedback would change significantly. I think we should use what we have in that regard. But if there have been 12 to 14 years of plans, by all means, let's bring that to life and use that to complete the work versus investing in new.
Makes sense.
And timing, I actually like Commissioner Murdoch's thoughts that, I mean, helping to preserve the lakefront and the erosion, and that seems like it could go in a whole variety of different directions too, and see what we have left and see where do we want to go from there.
The shoreline consultants' work to be faster, but I don't really know that to be true. But I would anticipate
the same.
that they would quickly get out ahead of a master planner who's probably going to be taking more input, and the erosion consultant is really going to be providing their insights right off the bat. There's not as much survey to be done.
I would
right?
agree.
Makes sense.
So would it be helpful for everyone on the board to get a copy, since, as Commissioner Murdoch mentioned, a copy of what the public survey that we had done a few years ago? I don't know that it would be necessarily helpful for the previous master plan, the referendum plan to be, because it's completely changed.
Well, I think to the extent that we had a landscaping plan already done.
There wasn't a landscaping plan done for there.
Steve, was there never a
There,
landscaping?
to a certain level, there was a landscaping plan. It was not, remember, we were on the ballot at the same time as doing the actual detailed planning.
Right.
And so a lot of the plans were evolving while the election was going on.
Okay, so any kind of information that might be helpful for the commissioners to see?
Okay.
Anything else?
No, this is helpful.
Okay, good.
I will say that Commissioner Murdoch has probably asked us to go further than the other commissioners in taking a look at Wallace Bowl, although Commissioner Wolf, you mentioned Lakeview Center, but you were asking us maybe to push this a little further than the other commissioners. That's sort of my question. As we get into these discussions, these interviews, what is it we're telling them? And I do think this is very, very good insight. How do other people feel about going any further than what we've been talking about, which is really master plan, landscaping, roads, sidewalks, maybe some refurbishing of Lakeview? Do you want to go further than that?
No, I just think, like I said, just an outside, like making
$3
it.
million to spend here. I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
know.
the bottom line. is
I'm
like-
thinking paint, I'm not thinking like
Right.
redoing.
Well,
Exactly.
Can I just ask a question, just to make sure we're all looking at this the same way? I think it was Commissioner Goebel who talked about a master plan for every park, and I don't think we're talking about doing any or all of that work within the next couple of years. So
Certainly,
when we
no.
apply that
Right.
mindset to Gilson, do we want to actively accept portions of the park from the planning process, or do we want to have a plan, but, commit to doing the basic, infrastructure that we know is in need in the near term, and know that we have a plan for future boards and future staff to use as a roadmap to guide future decisions?
And that was my point. I don't expect that we're going to be able to implement, I think we've all heard very clearly, we want to, the community wants us to be fiscally responsible, wants us to address the most current needs for now, but in terms of planning, it seems to me to do the complete plan, even if it might end up being, again, I remember 6, 8, 10 years ago, we talked about a 50-year plan potentially for Gilson.
I guess I'm of the mindset, I think we need to focus right now on the things that are going to be taking place in the next 3, 4, whatever years, the roads, the sewers, that kind of thing. Because if we plan too far ahead, and I only have a short experience here on the board, though, we could have something, and then 8 years or 10 years when we go to implement something, it's not going to be valid anymore. And then we've wasted the money to put some sort of plan together for Wallace Bowl or some other amenity there that's not going to be applicable in 10 years.
I'd like to comment, because I'd like to agree with Commissioner Wolf. And I'm going to say that I probably was wrong. I was wrong. So I always advocated for a complete master plan, a comprehensive master plan for Gilson Park. And was the guy kind of kicking and screaming, wanted to really put together what Commissioner Goebbels was talking about, a master plan all the way through. And I realized that all that did was probably generate too much smoke and heat. And instead, by keeping our focus on the task at hand, we managed to accomplish the lakefront plan that we've got. And so my thinking turned around considerably on that, like, okay, yes, maybe we should just focus on the tasks at hand. And that's sort of my question here, what are the tasks at hand? And I think I'm getting some insights into that. So I don't know, a 10-year plan, I guess maybe. I am thinking maybe it's best to just focus on what we've got in front of us. And I'm okay, this is a wide discussion. We're not like voting on this. And so discuss. What did you looking first to push further, and Commissioner Goebbels maybe further? What do you think? You still with that? You still think that going further is the right
Interesting
idea?
to hear about the smoke and heat of past planning efforts.
Well, I can show you the newspapers and all the flyers. You know,
Even just like the plan that we had for the referendum had a lot of great things, but they're not things that we would do now, even though it wasn't that long ago.
I would call a lot of those things targets.
Right. So that's why I'm hesitant to do too much planning around things that by the time we would implement them would be outdated.
So my
I may
thinking
be
is-
thinking of a lighter plan than what I'm understanding the rest of the commissioners are. It might include things like a routine cadence for sidewalk maintenance,
No.
right? Like,
sure.
we should probably repair them on some period of time, and I'm sure a civil engineer would know.
Right.
Sure.
And we should probably resurface roads inside the parks on some period of time. And
Right.
maybe that exists. But I
see.
think
I see
there's
what
a
you're saying.
much larger understanding of, or comprehension of what I'm saying as a master plan is, it was maybe just an order of operations
I see.
of things to do.
Helpful. Okay. And I would agree with that. Absolutely.
So.
How do we maintain our parks?
Any other comments?
No, I would agree with that, and that actually makes more sense in my mind, because it's a plan of maintenance.
Perhaps,
It's a plan
yeah.
of maintenance
Yeah.
and not a plan of
Amenity,
wish list and
maybe.
amenities
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we want in the future. And the plan of maintenance, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
you know,
mean,
I happen to have from a prior meeting the ADA transition plan, and I know that this is a plan that is completed over time as often as possible and as budget permits. And I'm thinking of something that also allows us to work on parks over time as budget permits. So, yeah, I want to be cautious on alarming other commissioners who are concerned about lots of planning expenses.
Well, and I think that the first thing we need to do is to review what's been done in the past and see if there's value in what we've already done so we don't duplicate those efforts. I do think that we should have the big picture, not to necessarily alarm the community or other commissioners about what might get done when and how it's going to get paid for. I agree with with Commissioner Goebel that a lot of this we would probably try to do over time, whatever it is. But I just think from a planning perspective, you should know what the vision is, irrespective of when it's going to be implemented. So you don't take 2 steps forward and then inadvertently take 1 step back at some point in the future. That would be my spin on it.
I think we can be careful about the things we've got to do in the next couple of years, focus on those, but just recognize when we're doing that, how might this affect the future plan, you know? But I really don't want to get too tied up in long-term design and planning when we have some very basic
Immediate
needs right in front of us that are overdue, you know? And we did a good job with the lakefront in with the beach house and with the parking lot. Just, I mean, we basically just put a big fence around it and said, we're not talking about anything else till we get this stuff done. And now we got the next thing we can do where we put a fence around what is it we really want to do at Gilson quickly and get it done. And recognizing that, you know, there are knock-on impacts, but I think we're probably smart enough, as is the people we're hiring, to kind of understand some things you have to be careful with, other things you don't have to be careful with. You just know you got to do them.
Yeah, and again, I guess I would make one more point, then I'll let this go so we don't belabor the point. But going back to what we did do in the past, I mean, I think as we take a look at it, the way we ended up funding it is going to have some consequences on what we can and can't do over the next few years, and quite frankly, what we can do at Gilson, because we have sort of moved forward the next 5 or 6 years of our debt extension base, which is going to constrain us in some different ways. But more importantly, the point I would make going back to planning is it's my understanding, and commissioners who were involved at the time can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that we moved the location of the beach house, quite frankly, so it somewhat blocks the view from the Lakeview Center, because there was some talk about perhaps expanding the sailing beach at some point. And if that's no longer the plan, well, then that may have had an impact on where that building was located. So again, I think it's better to have the big picture, but I've made my point and we can move on.
Yeah, I'm not aware of those being issues that we discussed. We moved the building, we did it for a specific reason that was completely unrelated to what you've heard. So I just want to make sure.
I wasn't on the board at that time.
no,
That was my understanding.
No, those were the exact talking points in the Lakefront Committee was, you know, move it to the south for some aesthetic, you know, but.
Just to have the
but-
drive
Aesthetic
open
was,
up.
yeah.
But it was
so-
also the added benefit of, A, we could possibly expand the sailing beach if we do that more
Oh, yeah,
easily.
Right,
but
if there
the
was a
real-
need.
Yeah, the real thing was getting it out of the middle, so as you came in, the aesthetic, you could see through to the water, and, you know, that was.
Yeah, it was,
drove it, yeah.
yep, there was that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brian, do you feel like you have enough information to take back to the,
I think so.
Okay,
And
good.
I would ask Steve, who also is going to be kind of charged with, you know, bringing this. Did you feel that this was at
So what
all
I'm hearing
edifying?
is planning should focus more on short-term than long-term, focus more on infrastructure needs, maintenance needs, and obviously a landscaping plan. But
Yeah.
other than that, let's not expand the scope much and keep that in mind as we continue to review these proposals.
Though we would be willing to perhaps talk about missed opportunities. I mean, we'll keep an eye on it, but that's not the focus of what we're, if somebody comes in with a great idea. So in terms of the board, there's several next steps. There will be interviews with these firms. There'll be a recommendation of these firms. There'll be input and presentations. The committee can handle it all. Obviously, recommendation of firms has to come to the full board. Interviews, normally the committee would handle it. I'm just making sure that that's okay. We're not headed to a committee of the whole, though I'm saying that's a possibility if everybody feels like they want to pile in on this. But right now, the committee is going to do the interviews and make recommendations unless I'm hearing objections to that. I would expect, in terms of input, the entire board would be asked to input with this, whoever these designers might be, and that there would be some presentations to the entire board, not just to the committee. And that's how I so the committee would do like monthly, and then infrequently there would be these chances for the full board to weigh in.
that's how I
Sounds
see it, yeah.
reasonable?
You guys
All
are
right.
doing the heavy lifting.
That's fine.
And thank you.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you.
I appreciate your patience in asking this question. We're going to be going into these interviews, and I really did want to make sure that we were speaking for the board in terms of the questions we had for these firms and how far to push this. Thank you. That wraps up my report. There really wasn't much else to discuss.
Thank you.
with
Any
regard to Lakefront.
any questions for the Lakefront Committee? Thank you very much. We'll move along to Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Recreation met earlier today. In the committee report, the manager's reports, they noticed that the paddle leagues have started, that Halloween happenings will be this Saturday, the 19th, from 4 to 8 p.m. The staff, one of the staff people at the Malincrot Center has moved to the rec center. We had a successful father and son Nerf night recently with 60 people. Our
sounds
soccer,
fun.
doesn't that sound awesome? Yep. Our soccer program had over 1,000 participants this fall, and it's wrapping up in the next week or two. So that was a significant increase over last year. So that's good news. Hockey has started, and figure skating regionals are at the end of the October. The TGI Friday skating, which is always popular with our youth, begins on October 18th, and then it occurs every other week. As we had a letter about Sizzling September for the full board, we had 3 letters at the committee about how much they appreciated the effort and what a positive program it was. And in committee, we talked about continuing it and perhaps expanding it next year. In addition, we had several folks from a Ramona school ask us to consider to have some sort of involvement with the Ramona School playground. We did not discuss it. It wasn't on the agenda. I suspect they're going to come back at our Parks and Rec meeting next month, and we'll look at it a little bit more closely. We spent a fair amount of time talking about bathrooms at different parks. We defined parks as being community parks or neighborhood parks, and where bathrooms may or may not be appropriate. We looked at the usage at certain parks. We're going to expand that discussion next month with the intent of making a recommendation back to the board about where permanent bathrooms might be appropriate. And then we spent lots of time going through the budget, and we were able to review all of the budget and move that forward in the process. And we finished with about 42 seconds to spare.
Amazing.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions for the Parks and Rec? I have one question. You mentioned the Ramona playground, that you guys will take that up next month, but that's not something that we as a park district have.
We historically have not done that. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We have not funded any school playgrounds. That's absolutely
Okay.
correct. Yes. I think there were more folks that wanted to speak, and we did limit their discussion because we had so much else on the agenda.
Right.
So we weren't trying to cut them off, but you're absolutely correct. That would be a substantial change for the park district were we to get involved in some way or
Okay.
not. And we didn't have a staff recommendation today about what we might or might not want to do.
Right, because it's, yeah.
It would be, it would
that's
seem to be
something that
beyond.
the district
It would seem to be beyond our scope.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We'll move along to the Golf Operations Committee.
Yes, the Golf Operations Committee met on October 1st, and as we are coming to the end of the golf season traditionally, except for a few of the diehards who play all the way through, we spent a lot of time discussing the condition of the course, any final golf outings. You know, certainly fall golf season is continuing in high school, but we spent the majority of the time on strengths and weaknesses planning, business planning to prep for budget season. So there's certainly some opportunities, as in all of our facilities and parks, to invest, and so the staff prepared, you know, some initial assessments of strengths and weaknesses compared to other areas. There's a good discussion, and we'll continue that next month.
Great. Any questions for the Golf Committee?
Yeah, just one. As you guys kind of go through the process, especially with the capital, I know one big capital item that's been talked about is the cart paths and trying to make them continuous for the whole course, which has a lot of benefits in terms of.
Yeah, and will probably be a topic again this year.
Yeah, there was going to be some analysis done that would kind of make a financial case for doing that, you know, in terms of additional revenues from carts and people who would play that wouldn't play if they can't use a cart, that kind of thing. So I'd love to, whenever you're ready, that would help in terms of when it comes to the capital review process. That would be, it's going to be a huge number, but if it has a huge benefit, that's very helpful.
I think that's a good item for staff to take back and consider. And as part of the business proposal, we do know that every month, any rain days will prevent carts. And that means that the public knows that if they need to use a cart or prefer a cart, they have to go elsewhere. So there is a cost benefit.
Yeah,
certainly.
definitely. Yeah.
So.
I just love to see the math behind it, because it makes a better case for spending it sooner if we have.
And there have been some one-on-one conversations offline. It's my understanding that we will have that analysis at the next golf meeting.
Yeah, that analysis was already done, and that was the basis of the conversation, I think, 2 meetings ago, on the lost revenue opportunities approximating about $90,000 a year versus the cost that we were using of $850,000 for the cart pass system. So I'll provide the detail.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
Any other questions for the Golf Operations Committee? Thank you. We'll move finally to Financial Planning and Policy Committee.
Okay, the Financial Planning and Policy Committee meeting met on Monday, September 16th. We had 4 basic items that I want to talk about tonight. One was an ADA update. Second was further information on the compensation study. Third item being the 2019 tax levy. And then something to do with the enrollment priority for programs, which was an interesting thing. I'll save that for last, though. With the ADA, Commissioner Goebel had a nice lead-in earlier because she's got a copy of the report there. We have a list of projects that we got from a consultant years ago, and most of those things have been taken care of over time. There's still some items left on it. Jerry's going to summarize those projects and the dollars that are left, so that can be updated, and also kind of when likely they're going to be done. And then this will help inform us as what is needed to be levied then in the special rec fund as we go through the budget process and the tax levy process. And if you recall, the fund's a combination of the NSSRA special rec programs to which we contribute, and then also the capital contribution that we've been making for the new building, and and general facility accessibility for the disabled within the district. So it's sort of the 3 things that kind of go into that fund. And really, the list of projects from Jerry is part of that whole general facility accessibility for the disabled. So when we get that, we'll review the list of projects. We'll determine what was completed from the list last year, gather up the ADA costs from any other projects that we've done this year that are not on the list, for example, the lakefront. And then we'll transfer funds out of the special rec fund into the fund that was originally paid for these expenses. So we'll get the fund kind of lined up and correct, and then the levy for the special rec fund for next year will be determined after we do that. So it's a bit of a bunch of steps to go through here. And then at the end result is we figure out what we need to levy. And then there's caps on that and stuff we have to worry about too. But there's a few things to do, but Jerry's sort of got the thing we have to do first. On the compensation study, we further reviewed the study results with staff. We discussed next steps. The major issue was the exclusion of the neighboring park districts with different resources from the study. And as we know, these are districts that we compete with for talent. And the decision was made to ask GovHR, who's the firm we're using, to add Glenview, Northbrook, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Highland Park, and Skokie for comparison, and then update the ranges. And then the committee requested that the information on grading and salary ranges for positions that weren't included in the survey are also to be shared when available. So, and Libby, I can give you a copy of this when I'm done, so you don't have to take all the notes. Regarding the 2019 tax levy, it was primarily a primer for Commissioner Goebel and a reminder for Commissioner Abbott and myself who've been through it before. We discussed different funds, the characteristics of the funds, as well as some of the levy
Thank you,
history.
Gordon. That's very kind of you.
And it's too soon in the process to determine what the tax levies are going to be yet, so that's to come. And then we had a visitor who's a non-resident with questions about how enrollment priority works, and her question was specific to ice skating. And her daughter's a fairly high-level skater in a class that, is sort of one of the better classes. And every year she sort of has to wheedle her way into the program because she's a non-resident, has to wait for all the residents.
They have been a resident, but now is a non, right.
Okay. So she's got to go through this process every year. Even though her daughter's been in the program, she's progressing. The next logical step is very clear, but she doesn't know she can get into that next step every year, and she has to work her way in. And so we started talking with staff, and there's a precedent from other programs for giving priority in situations like this, and the committee asked staff to just kind of look into this and come back with their recommendations for changes, if there are any, and if so, what's warranted. So it was an interesting discussion. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for the Financial Planning and Policy Committee? Thank you very much. We will move along to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before the board? Hearing none, we will move along to new business. Under new business, we finally have the most exciting agenda item on here, the appointment of the delegate and alternate to the IAPD annual business meeting. So at this time, is there anybody that would like to volunteer to be the backup delegate to our executive director, who will be nominated as our delegate?
What are the duties of the backup alternate?
I think it's just attending.
If I break an ankle, maybe you have to show up and sit through the meeting, but actually our attendance is not required, so you actually have no
I'll do it.
responsibility.
All right, Mr. Murdoch.
I can do that job, yeah, sure. But
right, let's get-
you spoke up first.
We'll give him
Let's go with
duty.
Murdoch.
Okay. So at this time, I move to appoint Director Wilson as delegate and Commissioner Mike Murdoch as alternate to represent the Wilmette Park District at the IAPD annual business meeting to be held January 25th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Everyone else is welcome to go. You don't just have to be a delegate to go.
And I do recommend it.
It's actually interesting.
It is interesting.
For a
There's
day.
session- Yeah. Any questions, comments? May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes. Thank you very much. Next on, or any other new business? All right, hearing none. Next, we will adjourn to closed session. So I move to adjourn to closed session to discuss the minutes of meetings lawfully closed, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes in accordance with Section 2C21 of the Open Meetings Act.
I'll second.
Thank you. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Murdoch?
Yes.
Commissioner Schisler?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Goebel?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes. We are moved to a closed